Hello, everyone. This is your right geek, honorary man king, and leader of the awkward cough squad, although I'm not really coughing anymore. Here with number one Marmaduke fan and Punchy Sonichu to talk about Brave New World. Welcome to my guests. How are you?
Thanks for having us on, Right Geek. I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm doing
and
pretty good. Not dead yet.
Good. Not dead yet.
Not yet.
Good. Not yet. Okay. So, Brave New World. Where do you think we should start, you guys?
Should we talk about its effect on dystopian books before we talk about the book itself? I actually read an interesting letter recently. I'll just kind of mention this as just an interesting thing. Aldous Huxley was George Orwell's French teacher. So the two of them would have, like little letters back and forth about the things they wrote. And I think Huxley wrote Orwell a letter about 1984 where he says, I like the book. One thing I think you might have missed, though, is I think it's more likely that the New World Order would make people love their servitude. So Huxley was kind of giving himself, praise for nailing how the New World Order was going to work. So that's kind of like a interesting contrast between the two. And it's also there's also this weird contrast where 1984 is like dead serious about how evil this is. And I was just struck by how weird the world in Brave New World is while reading it. I found it a lot funnier as an adult than I did as like a high school student.
So hang on. So you say Huxley said he liked 1984 or he liked 1984?
I don't know. I don't remember the exact content. Like he was praising Orwell at the same time he was saying, "Well, I did it better, George."
Okay. Yeah, I just thought that was kind of ironic because, like I said in the last stream, I've got I've got kind of a galaxy brain take on on Brave New World.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should wait for that or what, because I don't want to sort of derail things.
We've been waiting all month for this, so I kind of like it as the opening shot.
All right.
I think we should start with that as the opening. Yeah.
All right. Well, because I mean, the thing is that you may have actually encountered this sort of take before, like especially you, Marmaduke, if you've been sort of digging into Huxley's past. And again, I don't want to monopolize the entire time, turn this into like Punchy Sonichu goes Alex Jones on Huxley or anything. But yeah, so I mean, if you'd want to start somewhere else or what you'd want to do, I'll kind of defer to both of you on this.
Well, I think first of all, I want to build on what Marmaduke brought up about Aldous Huxley and George Orwell being in communication with each other by just discussing real quick the contrast between the two works, between Brave New World and 1984. Marmaduke mentioned one where 1984 is deadly serious. Brave New World is serious, but not as much. What are some of the other? I can think of some, but I want to get your input first. What are some of the other contrasts that you can think of between the two books?
Maybe the sense of humor or the writing style. I think 1984 is a little bit more like a straight-on writing style, and something that stood out to me about Brave New World is he sort of wants to write in a way that illustrates the point. So he'll talk about the importance of poetry. And the line that I think of is Mustafa Mond waving away the idea of history. And he has this repeated phrase, whisk, whisk, and there went Shakespeare. Whisk, there went the Greeks and Jesus, right? He's sort of using a flowery language to make the point that this banal guy is just speaking casually about not needing history anymore. And as he kind of like waves his hand away flippantly, there goes everything, everything about human history that ever was beautiful or great.
Mm-hmm. Any input from you, Punchy?
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree. I think you're both right. I mean, there is a definite tonal difference between 1984 and Brave New World. It is as Marmaduke, as you and Huxley himself evidently pointed out, there's a large difference between the approach of the New World Order in both books. One of them is a very sort of happy, positive place. The other one is built on fear and cancel culture and destroying everything. And I think again this will kind of get back into my thesis and play a central role. So I like that you guys are bringing this up, because I think it'll make my job easier.
Yeah, I think that the approach of the dystopia, yes, is definitely the major difference. The big difference is that in Brave New World, control is achieved by getting people when they're young, essentially when they're embryos, and then from that point conditioning them to be the type of people that we need them to be in order for this dystopia to function. Whereas in 1984, it is all top down. It is all in childhood and adulthood, just control and, as you say, fear and threat of torture that keeps people in line.
If it's the party in 1984, it's the culture and almost like the system itself in Brave New World. Like even the alphas who understand how the system works and are even critical of the system still obey the system. They don't have Big Brother or the party threatening to come crushing down on them. There are some threats like being sent to the islands, but they're even almost more humane and banal. They're too banal to bother to worry too much about killing anybody who upsets them too much. We'll just send you off to an island, put you there.
Yeah. That was another thing I was going to. That was another thing I was going to point out. Whereas 1984 depends on the constant surveillance state and also the threat of torture. In Brave New World, if someone disrupts the stability and happiness of the New World Order, then they just get sent to some isolated island somewhere, so we don't have to bother with them. Which, as you say, is a vaguely more humane approach to the dissenters in your midst. It kind of so basically, Brave New World's New World Order is not actually something that reaches over the entire world. They have allowed for certain corners of the world to just run without their interference, essentially.
If it's not economically efficient.
Yeah, if it's not like, well, they leave the savage reservations the way they are because they're just not in economically fecund areas of the world. So they're in the Southwest desert. That's not really prime land that we want. So we'll just let them be where they are,
Yeah, it's not even just the dissenters. It's, if you just want to go off and live as a savage, or, be a savage and cling to silly old ideas like freedom and God and things, then you're perfectly welcome to. You can just fudge off and go into the desert or something. Whereas in
love it or leave it.
Love it or leave it. But they're genuinely serious about allowing you to leave it. Whereas like 1984, you go into the woods and there are like, cell phones tracking you everywhere, little cameras and microphones and stuff. So, I agree with all of that. And again, I think this is playing into my hands. Mwahaha.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of the difference is what the two authors are critiquing. If we can say that they are critiquing, I don't know what Punchy is going to throw down on us when we get to that point. But as far as what they're critiquing, Orwell was very obviously critiquing the all-controlling state and the surveillance state, whereas in Brave New World, what seems to be under the microscope is consumer culture. The fact that, look, one of the things that struck me when I read it this time around this week is that one of the things that the people in this culture are trained to be is to value what is new and to discard what is old, to the point of, oh, if you damage your clothes, we'll just throw them away and get new ones. So it's all about consume, as the Groypers would say, you know.
Right.
So that seems to be, and like the fact that it's that the entire world is based on our Ford and the idea of the consumer, you know, assembly line society. That seems to indicate that what Huxley is concerned about is the new consumer culture that was arising in his time, and his feeling that was going to somehow diminish human experience.
Also, there's something I add to the consumer aspect. It was when I was a kid in like high school, I just thought it was weird how it was sort of capitalist and communist. Like I just thought, well, that's weird. How come they like Gerald Ford and everybody's named like Marx or Lenin, or they read George Bernard Shaw, right? Like it seems like an odd combination of ideologies.
Right.
And looking at it as an adult, I'm thinking of, you know, like communist China introducing capitalism. So I think it's maybe Huxley being ahead of himself a little bit and seeing maybe like there's a parallel in Marxism and like hyper-capitalism where both of them have a dehumanizing element, and he doesn't like that dehumanizing element, whether it's a Marxist variant or a, you know, hyper-capitalist variant. Mm-hmm. And I was also really interested in, especially in the early chapters, you see this sort of really fastidious scientific mindset. Everything's about technicalities and everything's about procedure. So they're really smart, but they never ask sort of basic philosophy or basic life questions. So again, that's almost like a parallel to how in the academy, you can have someone who's a hyper expert on this or that, you know, civilizational economic pattern or what have you. And, you know, they don't know how to put their shoes on in the morning, or like the Harvard professor who famously got taken in by a con artist. There's this problem of intellectual idiots, and Brave New World seems to have like very intellectual, hyper scientific nimrods, basically.
Which one? Hasn't that happened a lot? The Harvard professors getting taken in by con artists.
Oh yeah, that's just my favorite. You got to look that up. That is my favorite human interest story of all time, because this Harvard professor just basically got taken in by these lesbian con artists who just kept feeding him this more and more elaborate romantic story and asking him for money.
Oh, like an actual con. I thought you meant like an academic con, because I know they've fallen for that a lot. Like oh god, what was it?
I forget who the author was, but somebody actually wrote a book entitled "Intellectual Morons" for precisely that reason. Yeah.
Like I remember there was a very famous case like a couple decades ago, I think, where somebody had written like complete gibberish with a postmodern essay generator. Like an early AI essay generator, and gotten it published in all these journals or sociology journals.
You're talking about Sokol, probably.
Yeah, the Sokol stuff and
the conceptual Sokol, penis. That one.
Yeah. The penis is equal to the square root of -1 or something like that. So
the conceptual penis. Okay, I've been listening to a lot of James Lindsay, so I know how that came about. They didn't actually run it through like a postmodern generator. They actually thought about it. Like they actually read the postmodern scholarship and said, okay, now that we have studied this in detail, we can now replicate it. And they did successfully. Like, so it wasn't like Sokol. Well, so Sokol was just, you know, he just put together a bunch of BS and got it published in a postmodern journal. And that was like in the 90s, the first burst of controversy on nonsense in the academy.
I'm going to need a peer-reviewed source for that, please. Source.
Big popular one. The big popular book, yeah.
But you know, as far as, you know, Lindsay, Boghossian, and Pluckrose, what they did is they they weren't just joshing. They actually did seriously study the entire scholarship in that sort of postmodern space. And then they said, okay, we understand it now. Let's replicate it. Like,
hang on, was Lindsay involved in that then?
Yes. It was
really?
Yes, James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, and Helen Pluckrose were the three who were involved in that.
Was that the gentleman that used to post on Twitter back when I was still on Twitter? The wokish guy, the translations of the wokish.
Oh,
or
he's
something?
still posting. Yeah, that's him, and he's still doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, he's okay. Yeah, I really like his work
website
on
now. Yeah.
Okay.
He has a whole. Yeah. He has a whole website now called New Discourses. It's a really good website. He writes very, very long essays, basically breaking down all this postmodern BS and talking about why it's BS.
Yeah, I like the stuff you posted.
Yeah,
by him.
And he is doing it like he gets accused all the time of, oh well, you just don't understand it, and he's like, I'm sorry, but I've spent several years reading it, and I do understand it, and that's why I know it's BS. Like,
yeah, I mean, I always just thought he was a very well spoken, like maybe grad student or something who is a little gutsy and had decided to publish stuff under a pseudonym or something on Twitter. I didn't actually realize he was that guy or one of those guys from the 90s. But yeah, that's great. That's great to know. Because I've recommended him to other people, and I've always been kind of leery because I'm like, oh, maybe they'll think it's just some hack or something on Twitter. But if he's actually like that guy, then yeah, that's solid credentials.
He's just he's taking it super seriously. He's one of those like he really like he's read like the seminal works in that zone as well. Like, Kimberly Crenshaw and all that. He's read all of that. So he's read it, he's understood it, and he's ready from a deep foundational grounding knowledge to argue against it. So
because of the complexity of postmodernism, it can really be easy to get lost in the weeds of it.
Yeah, and one of the things he points out is, and I think he's right in this, is okay. Yes, though you scholars of Foucault and all that, you might be right that Foucault is quote unquote misunderstood, or people who have not understood him correctly or whatever. But he's like, but that doesn't matter, because what matters in our world right now is how Foucault is being applied right now. So maybe in some more obscure writings, Foucault said things that actually made sense, but it doesn't matter, because what's being used is the stuff that doesn't make sense, and that's what we have to combat. Like,
I've always thought, like, it matters. It almost matters more how philosophers get dumbed down to like the Cartoon Network letter level than what philosophers actually thought.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you could probably.
That is precisely Lindsay's point.
Yeah, I'd probably maybe draw some parallels between that and religion too, because I know one of the criticisms of religion that's often brought up is that people misinterpret the Bible and they use it to do all sorts of things, and of course people will say like, well, the Bible says this and that, and oh no, we lost Mom. He's been eliminated. Hello.
Oh no. Okay, he'll probably come back. There he is. Okay.
Google got him.
Oops, we lost him for a second. Oh, okay, we're back.
But anyway, hello, Mom. Are you okay? Did Google get you? Big brother memory hole.
I didn't share any Japanese propaganda cartoons, so I think I'm all right.
Okay, that's good. I still can't believe they got me banned from that.
I have not said. We have not said ivermectin works to treat. We haven't said ivermectin works to treat COVID-19, and we haven't said Donald Trump actually won the election. Oops! Oh wait, now this is going to be struck down.
Speaking of that, I mean, one of the reasons I had to restart my browser was because I just saw an article from the Daily Mail It's another one of these, like, they've proven that they think they've proven that COVID was manufactured by Chinese viral engineers using American money.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been going on for months, and it keeps getting shut down. But this time, apparently, it's not been censored, so maybe something will come of it. I don't know, but
you just read a meme, and then 6 months later, it's on the news.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Anyway, to veer back to Brave New World.
Brave New World. We were talking about Brave New World at one point. that got memory hole.
Summa tangentum. Yeah, summa tangentum, everyone.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think I think I agree with both of you on all these points so far. I think it may be a critique of. Oh no, we lost Mom again. Well, anyways, it may be a critique of consumer culture. I was going to say, as far as Marmaduke was talking about 1984, possibly being a critique of overactive government. I think it was more a critique of control over information than specifically overactive government. Although I think overactive government is definitely something in there, but given that he was that Orwell was a commie himself, I think he was more concerned with government being overactive and not, destroying information. But that could wait for a discussion on 1984 if we're ever allowed to do that.
I mean, Animal Farm. It comes across an Animal Farm because there's the Snowball is the good guy socialist, and Napoleon is the bad guy Stalin socialist. Right. So
Animal Farm, Snowball's Trotsky. But I think Trotsky was kind of an arsehole too. He's just remembered fondly because he didn't get to the point where he was murdering people. he was ousted before he could get there. But yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with both of you. I think both of those things are elements of the book, and I do think there is a bit of critique of consumer culture. Although I think that the critique of consumer culture may be the only major critique in Brave New World. I'm not sure he really gets too far beyond that.
One of the things that's weird about it is it seems a little irrational. Like, why would you, if you were a utilitarian, why would you set up a place where there is unnecessary consumption? Now, he does kind of explain it later. Mustafa gets into, well, there's also the social side to consider. So there are things we could do more efficiently, but then that would cause the people to have unrest. Therefore, we actually keep certain inefficiencies in the market if it keeps the people and the different caste systems in line, right? Now,
it's a well-engineered inefficiency.
Right.
It's a purposeful fuck up.
I also want to dial back to something Marm said about the scientific aspect of the society in Brave New World. I wanted to add that only goes to a point, though, because as Mustafa Mon says, when the alpha pluses actually start getting into the real science, the theoretical stuff, then they verge on subversiveness. So the science that the science that controls the society, to me, looked very much like, to me, when I read it this week, looked very much like the science, in quotes and capitalized, that we are now supposed to worship as members of American society, which is that's really not science at all. What it is consensus. It's what our elites want us to believe.
Right. I think Mustafa Mon's great speech lays that out because he had to choose between his love of science and his love of happiness and the culture. He actually kind of regrets leaving behind doing real science to serve happiness, but he basically makes an informed decision. He understands what's being asked of him, give up science and enforce the orthodoxy. He chooses to enforce the orthodoxy and I guess manage happiness for everyone else, and then commits himself to that decision. So there's this maybe tragic side to him where he almost admires these people who are intelligent enough to buck against the system, but he's come up with a rationale for why the system works. He's really the only character that they meet who is both smart enough to understand what's being done to them and willing to commit himself to defending it. Bernard Marx kind of waffles about it because he's sort of a virgin. What's the other guy's name? It's who's the Chad who's like too smart. Helmholtz.
Yeah, Helmholtz. Yeah,
Helmholtz. He's a little too smart, so he feels a little outside of things. John the Savage hates it because it's completely outside of his frame of reference. I feel sad for him because it seems like he was just like, oh, I'm going to go on a little adventure in this brave new world, and then he just gradually just gets beaten down by it, right? Like all of them have some reason why they're uncomfortable with the civilization or don't quite like it, but only Mustafa both understands it and he kind of hates and loves it. It's like he hates its sacrifice, but he believes it's rational enough that he has just sort of like committed himself to saying, "Yep, this is what God or this is what our values should be if we want happiness as the final end."
Yeah, it's almost as if he's the one character in the book who actually sees things clearly.
Yeah. So one thing is his argument is so well presented. Like is this Huxley presenting the villain as kind of like honestly as he can, or is this almost Huxley like sympathizing with the villain to a point? Like maybe it actually would be better to be in this sort of creepy.
Ding, ding.
Okay, yes, is that leading into the galaxy brain take?
This is well, actually,
is that when we get to the galaxy brain take? Yeah.
That's not my big brain take, but that's my galaxy brain take. Do you want me to just kind of try and get this out there like my thesis? So I don't
sure.
All right.
Sure.
I'll try and keep this brief, but the big brain layer, right? First layer is I can still remember the first time I read this book back in like junior high, and my first reaction was, I think it was similar to like you, Marmaduke, mentioned this earlier, was like, oh, it's actually not that bad, especially compared to 1984 and these other dystopian novels. And I think that's because it isn't really a dystopian novel at all. I think that the system presented in Brave New World is actually quite utopian. It's an Epicurean paradise, basically, and for many of the reasons that we've already touched on, right? It's a place of voluntary pleasures and fulfillment, and everyone just kind of likes what's going on. You can leave it if you don't love it. You're not constantly in terror, right? It's a fairly good place if you take it at face value, right? Right. Now, I think most people view Brave New World as a dystopian novel, right? The sort of classic take is that this is a bad place and we shouldn't have a Brave New World, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think that reading of Brave New World says more about us as an audience than it does about the world system built up in Brave New World, right? If that makes any sense. Like, I think
you're right. I think that up to that level, I think you're right. I think that one of the things that Aldous Huxley is depending on is a cultural space that instinctively understands that suffering is a part of life and is something that ennobles human nature.
Yeah. He's counting on us, or the dystopian reading is counting on us being able to empathize with the savage and the savage's point of view, right? The savage believes in suffering and family, God, and living as an individual and all these things. And if you have that kind of cultural value, then it's going to come off as a dystopia. But I think if you approach the book just as neutrally and objectively as possible, like that's not really, you can't ever do that completely, but if you sort of suppress your biases for a minute and just sort of read it as, yeah, this is just a society, and let's see if it works. I think the way Huxley presents it is actually very, very nice and very positive. And just for the record, like, I don't think Brave New World would be good. I'm not pro Brave New World here. I think that if there was a New World Order patterned off of Huxleyan methodology, or whatever you want to call it, I think it would actually wind up much, much worse than what Huxley is presenting it. I think it's an overly optimistic view. But I think that just taking the book at face value, like if I was a space alien and I dropped in and knew nothing about the world, I'd be like, yeah, this is a nice, hedonistic utopia place. I mean, obviously I'd have to know hedonism or whatever, but you know what I mean, right? So that's
Plato's Republic. Is Plato's Republic supposed to be what Plato thinks is actually a good idea, or is it just Plato musing about the tragedy of politics, right? Like banish all the poets, basically kill the old generation, and create this noble lie where there's sexual communism and there's no longer family control, right? And don't let any of the kids study philosophy until they're 30, because while they're soldiers, philosophy can be dangerous. But when they get to be old men and are running things, then philosophy can be useful. Even the caste system, right? Like the golden-hearted people, the silver-souled people, the bronze-souled people. I was actually kind of interested how the alpha through epsilons in Brave New World, it almost kind of maps onto this weird new, YouTube culture. I think they call it like the social sexual hierarchy, and they're obsessed with, are you an alpha? Are you a sigma? It's almost like astrology for men.
Yeah, are you a beta male? Are you a cock? Are you a Chad? Yeah, I'm a Chad. You're just a beta male. No, you're a gamma male. All this kind of stuff. So I think that much. I mean, it's not an obvious take, but you guys are kind of with me on that, right?
All right. So I want to clarify something though.
That's where I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Like, for example, I think Mustafa names Christianity and liberalism. There was once a thing called Christianity. There was once a thing called liberalism. As these two things they basically had to destroy in the 9 Years' War to establish the Brave New World. And then it was sort of like after the 9 Years' War, it was like, do we really need to kill all these people? That's not that efficient. So they became more pacifist basically after, engaging in a bloody war and getting their space. So I always think there's a difference artistically between an artist saying, here's a bad guy, and doesn't the bad guy's argument make sense? And an artist, I don't know, maybe like sneakily or subversively trying to say, I actually agree with the bad guy, right?
Exactly.
So I'm interpreting Brave New World as him like kind of like doing his damnedest to say the bad guy's argument makes sense, but still at the end of the day, like Huxley, especially when kind of Huxley speaks as a narrator, you can tell that Huxley loves Shakespeare and he loves this sort of dramatic, poetic world, and he sees the dismissal of that as something wicked and evil. So are you potentially even seeing it as maybe Huxley going as far as subversively saying, I actually like aspects of the Brave New World, or do you think he's stopping short at
Absolutely. That is my second level. That's my galaxy brain take. I think
so. Huxley is one of the lizard aliens.
Yes. Well, that's going to be my universe brain take. So just hold on for a minute. But as far as the galaxy brain take is concerned, yes, I do think that this book was deliberately written as, kind of a, what would you call it, like a satire or like an inverse satire or something? Like he's presenting it as if it's a bad thing, but he's kind of nudging you in the way that you'd be like, you know what, that's terrible, but it's really not that bad, right? And I think that was absolutely intentional on his part. I think he's much too smart and he's much too good a writer to have done that accidentally. I think he does sympathize with the Brave New World idea. I think he does sympathize with Mustafa, certainly a lot more than the Savage. I think a lot of the aspects of the book are presented in such a way that it's kind of hard to justify, like an old liberal or an old Christian worldview. For example, like the idea that we were talking about earlier, with the voluntary leaving of society, right? You can leave society if you want to. You can be like the savage and stand up for your principles and say, no, I reject the brave new world, right? Or you can be like his mum and be like, hey, you know what? I like Soma. I like TV. I'm just going to go and have Soma and TV and have sex and have fun and everything's all fine. And if you want to do that, then that's fine. There's no pain, the sickness and disease kind of eradicated. Everything's great. Your place in society. But if you decide to be the savage, right, you can do that too. And then you get miserable and your mom dies and you kill yourself. Right. So it's very clearly, at least to my mind, I think it's quite clear where Huxley's sympathies lie, especially in regards to, people who would dissent from this kind of system versus the people who would actually control this sort of a system. I think he's very much pro Brave New World.
Pro New World Order.
Yes, he
okay. I mean, it's striking that the heroes don't win or affect any positive change at the end.
It's striking because you're trying to think of it as a dystopian novel.
Okay.
Rather than a utopian novel. But.
So you're also taking the satire level to another level, because there's one level you could look at it as a satire and you could say, well, this is a satire on the New World Order. Their world is so absurd, like they're reciting Georgie Porgy and engaging in orgies, right? Like their world itself is kind of silly and banal. And you're almost saying it's almost like you're describing it as a deconstruction of the dystopia, where what it's actually making fun of it's making fun of the people who read dystopias and take them seriously. Like, oh no, this could happen to us. And this is almost saying, well, who cares if it happens to us, right?
Actually, you know what? I hadn't really thought of it that way, but now that you're saying it, like that could be possible too. All
right, so this is a real death of the author. Like, what is the author's intent question, right? Because I don't know too much about Huxley's life story. I always just kind of assumed he was one of these old liberal types, or maybe like an atheist.
He's a very, very, very old type. He's this is my universe brain take. Like my universe brain take is, I think I can prove this. I can prove this beyond any shadow of a doubt that Huxley did in fact sympathize with the New Order and was in fact writing this book, not just as kind of a positive spin on. Actually, there's have you guys ever heard of predictive programming?
No, I'm not the biggest programming. Like, I've heard that term, but I don't know what it would do, actually.
Yeah, it's like a psychological concept that gets brought up in like Alex Jonesy circles. So I don't really want to talk about it too much in case you get shot down.
Bam, yeah.
But it's one of these ideas of.
Well, I already said Trump won the election, so this stream is on.
Yeah,
anyway.
Now. But anyways, this predictive programming idea, it basically posits that people will seed the popular discourse with ideas that can then later be sort of brought to the fore by social engineers and by people in positions of authority.
So the Simpsons can have like little predictions on it, and those were put there to torture us, and get us used to the idea. Yeah,
the Simpsons predicted it is one of these sort of popular versions of the meme. There's more sophisticated analyses. Like there was a podcast that I used to listen to about the CIA influences in Hollywood. They used to take. God, what was his name? There was a CIA liaison to Hollywood, and they would go to all the movies that the CIA liaison in Hollywood had had influence on and look for like the changes he'd made to the script, and then sort of do like a cultural analysis based on what kinds of stuff the CIA was trying to put into these movies and why they might be trying to do it. That kind of thing. I remember like a decade ago, these people were flipping out about zombies and disease porn and civil war being seeded into the popular conscience. And at the time I was like, oh, you guys are crazy. Like, none of this is going to happen. And now it's like every normie is. So, I mean, it might not be, it might not be something that really goes on, but it is an idea that's been proposed.
So the parallel then would be Huxley in writing what looks like a critique of the New World Order. It actually surreptitiously gives people the argument in favor of the New World Order.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if he was intending it as like paving the grounds, but I do think that he sympathized with the ideas that he was putting to paper. He might have been against this consumerism, which is probably why consumerism gets the shortest straw out of anything else in Brave New World. He's also I actually thought he was kind of dim on communism when I was reading the book. I actually haven't read it in months, so my recollection isn't as fresh as yours. But like Bernard Marx or whatever his name is, he's a reference to communism, right? And he's one of the quote unquote heroes. So you'd think like Marx, Marx is undermining capitalism and yay go Marx. But
so the way I interpreted that is they allow Marxist names and capitalist names to be the names that continue to exist. So
in the world,
right?
It does,
so,
but I think
like when he mentions George Bernard Shaw, like I almost see that as a joke at the expense of George Bernard Shaw. Like, hey George, you'd be one of their favorite authors in this weird futuristic world, right?
He's like the Chinese fascist kind of approach, like China. I mean, it is a fascist state. It's a free market capitalist society that has a lot of overhead control by the government. So that's textbook fascism.
It's like they specifically like the idea of everybody owning everyone else out of Marx, but they don't care about being consistent with, like a Marxist utopia wouldn't have class divisions. They've decided to keep class divisions as a way of keeping the overall machine working. They just make sure people are happy with the class they're stuck in.
Yeah,
right?
everyone's happy and everyone kind of gets along. And the one thing that he really seems to be kind of butthurt about is this consumerism kind of approach.
What about the aesthetic side of it, right? Like we have to give up high art in favor of so this is where I think, like, if I was going to attack it's either the galaxy brain or the universe take. Like the toughest part for that, for me about that is the sections where.
All right, well, Huxley, the universe take. Let's just.
All right.
Have the
So the hardest part is when Huxley, is quoting Shakespeare and he's kind of like giving, he's writing in this sort of flowing purple prose, right? You can tell he loves reading and writing purple prose, and the dichotomy he's making is the Brave New World hates purple prose, it hates flowery language, it hates emotional expression. And it's almost like when he writes about Jesus, or he writes about, I think he was an atheist, but it's almost like he's writing a love letter to Christianity as an atheist, where he says, well, I do love this, like this poetic, deep aspect of it, even if he can't believe in it himself. Right. So for him to be, for Aldous Huxley to be part of the New World Order, he has to be so good at faking it that he can actually kind of like write with poetic verve or with poetic emotion about how much he loves the old world and how much he loves the sort of the world of Shakespeare.
Yeah, well, I mean that's part of being part of this New World Order clique, isn't it? I mean they're the ruling elites, and part of your education as one of these, because I think we should get into Huxley himself. Because I know you mentioned that he was Orwell's teacher. And he clearly has this interest in science. Do you guys? I mean, you're obviously familiar with Darwin, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Darwin's bulldog?
No.
No.
What was it? Thomas Huxley, I think. Yeah, Thomas Henry Huxley. He was actually one of my childhood heroes. I'm a bit afraid to admit. Again, I'm not pro New World Order. Please, please don't get rid of me. But I did really like Thomas Henry Huxley, and he was one of these very posh upper class Englishmen back in the days of Darwin, and he was actually the gentleman who was largely responsible for popularizing Darwin. They gave him this nickname of Darwin's bulldog because he was always ready to attack people and defend Darwin, and he kind of did all the political groundwork.
The culture war. So, like, if Darwin was off just looking at finch beaks, Huxley's the guy. He's the proto Fedora.
Yeah, he's like the if Darwin is the research scientist, Huxley is kind of the Richard Dawkins or something, going out and dropping his.
That's the name I thought.
that kind of stuff. So Huxley actually comes from a very prominent family. He wasn't just some random nobody or like a middle class normie or anything. He was part of the British upper crust, and not just the sort of normal British upper crust either. His whole family has been part of this Anglo scientific establishment throughout the entire progressive era, right? From the start of these ideas of scientific management and eugenics, control over human beings, right? Like all this stuff that was coming out of the Anglo-American establishment. His family was central to all that. There's also his brother. I don't know if you know this. Who his brother was?
Not particularly.
No, I do not.
Okay. Hang on. I gotta look up his name again. But sorry, I should have looked up his name prior. But was it Julian? Yeah, it was Julian. His older brother was actually the first director general of UNESCO, of all things. So if you're going to write, the UN education, sorry,
Reiki, were you going to say anything?
No,
were you
go
going to
ahead.
say anything, Reiki?
Oh
okay.
yeah, I thought you were about to say anything, but
No, I was just going. I was just responding.
Yeah, so if you're going to write a book about a world government that controls education and science and culture, it just so happened that Aldous Huxley's older brother was the founder of this world government organization that aimed to control education, science, and culture.
So here's something interesting. You're kind of pointing out that Huxley's family tree would have connections with. There are parallels between Huxley's family history and the kind of people who would be the New World Order
his family future as well. The whole UNESCO thing actually happened, I think, like a decade or so after the publication of Brave New World. So it wasn't like he was just writing this like, oh yeah, you remember that time my brother set up a world government organization to try and control childhood development in order to, through scientific principles in order to direct culture globally. So, that was actually something that happened later. It was just part of this milieu that he was living in.
Okay. I would like to push back just a little bit, although that's very interesting and definitely germane to what we see in the novel. I would like to say that family history or that family context doesn't necessarily mean that Aldous Huxley sympathized with it. It may mean that he was simply familiar with it and was therefore at an excellent place in order to critique it, because he could see it in his own family.
Certainly, yeah. That is an argument that people have raised before. I know, Huxley's family history isn't commented on a lot. I think a lot of people are unaware of it. I was actually unaware of it until I'd seen a piece by James Corbett, who I know I've plugged his channel before, but he's excellent. But yeah, I mean that's definitely an argument that people have made, that maybe Aldous was the black sheep, and he wrote this book knowing that this was actually, part of the intellectual soil of the progressive movement at that time, and he's like, oh, look what my family's trying to do. Let's warn you.
Because the irony would be he's actually creating a cultural touchstone for anti-New World Order thought, right?
Well, it could be ironic, yes, but I don't actually think it's ironic, because I think I can prove that he's actually pro almost everything that he wrote in.
All right, let me give you one more pushback, and then I'll let you give that. So maybe one problem is, how do artists make art? So I've heard the Simpsons things. What's hard for me is I love Alex Jones style theories at like a humorous level. And part of the humor is you can always sort of like find weird examples of them all around. So like the Simpsons predicting the 2020 election, things like that. Like my problem has always been, as an artist, I know that I'm always tempted to reference that kind of thing. So if I'm just like coming up with a story, I'll say, who will the bad guys be? I know the bad guys will be the Illuminati, right? So maybe a problem with the programming theories is it would say, well, if I have the Illuminati in the story, I must be part of the Illuminati, or the Illuminati must be encouraging me to put it in the story. Whereas the fact that the Illuminati show up so much in pop culture make them a fun kind of villain, right?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I'd agree from an epistemological standpoint. The fact that he's presenting all this stuff from his family isn't necessarily evidence that he agrees with it. It's just evidence that he's aware of it, that he knows that this is part of his upbringing, and that he's bringing it in a digestible form, like to people, right? So I don't think that's necessarily proof that he agrees with it. However, he did go on to write another novel called The Island. Are you guys aware of this one?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
The Island. I'm aware of its existence, but I have not read it. Yeah.
Yes, I was also dimly aware of its existence. I didn't actually pursue it until after I saw the James Corbett piece. It's one of those things that goes very unremarked. Like, everybody knows about Brave New World. Some people have heard passing reference to The Island. I don't really know anybody who's read it. But actually, I'm just going to. Do you guys have access to
Wikipedia,
Wikipedia
or something?
Yeah, because somebody's actually gone and very helpfully made a chart. Because as you'll find out, if you read The Island, it's almost exactly identical to the society proposed in Brave New World. There's the differences between Brave New World and The Island basically boil down to intention, right? Like, for example, drugs. In The Island and in Brave New World, they both use drugs. It's a drugged out society. But the Island, it's used for theme comparison, used for enlightenment and social bonding, whereas in Brave New World, the drugs are used for pacification and self-medication. So it's
okay. So from a world building perspective, he's taking the themes, or you'd always have to think, like, what is the view of sex? What is the view of death? He's taking these themes, but he's not copying them identically. They're functioning in a different way on the island.
He's taking the same mechanisms and just giving them a different little context switch, right? He's saying, well, we're not using the drugs to oppress people, we're using the drugs to enlighten people, right? But either way, it's still a society based on a bunch of hippies sitting around getting drugged out of their minds, right? So you've got the drugs, you've got the destruction of the family, you've got the trances for indoctrination, you've got the artificial birthing, cloning, and everything. You've got all the wild sex parties. You've got the Purge Night, right? Which was one of the things I really genuinely liked about Brave New World, like without irony. I always thought the Purge Night was cool. And you've even got like the constant propaganda being beamed at people. Only in this case, it's like pretty island birds who are coming by and telling you stuff instead of like robots, robot Alexas popping up and shouting propaganda at you. Right, so it's mechanically it's exactly the same thing, and nobody disputes that Huxley was writing The Island as a positive utopia. Like Huxley sympathizes with this system, like this system that's presented in Brave New World is the kind of system that he wants to see. Maybe there's some questions in his mind about what your intent could be. Right, like an intention-based ethics or something. Like if you're doing this because you want to crush people's individuality, that's wrong. But as long as you do it, because you're doing it for the right reasons, then yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. Right. So I definitely I think I can confidently say that he is in fact pro Brave New World. He does have elements of the book, like you were saying, Marmaduke, with the consumption. He also touches on consumption over the course of The Island. He kind of, it's one of these like big oil stories where the evil oil guys come in and they're evil because they're big oil. But as far as the actual world itself, like the control mechanisms for this world and the drugs and the lack of families and the constant propaganda, like that's what he wants to happen.
Okay.
He's not fucking around with that.
Okay.
All right. So I hadn't heard of The Island, but let me give you maybe like one more, I don't know, like way of thinking about it. I think like for an old liberal, the kind of like the emergence of new liberalism, they have a different relation to it than someone who's, for example, in the context of Christianity. So like for someone who's in the context of Christianity, it's like, well, yeah, you almost start thinking of the Book of Revelation when you see New World Order stuff, right? Like it's the mark of the beast, right? Yeah. Like it's like sort of like Christians have the Book of Revelations and the Bible have kind of like programmed them to be suspicious of that kind of stuff. But if you're like an intellectual liberal, then it kind of poses this problem for you. Well, what if this is the ideal, scientific society? I think like the closest thing for like me would be, I sort of think about theocracy the way I think that liberals have to think about the problem of new leftism, right? Because theocracy is this punching bag in a lot of the culture. And then for a Christian, you sort of have to wrestle with, well, gee, it would be good if we followed the law of God, wouldn't it? But then would it be bad if the theocrats had too much power, right? So if for like a Margaret Atwood, theocracy is this dangerous thing that we have to run away from. For a Christian, even if we understand what's wrong with it, we kind of have to wrestle with it a little bit, because we see they offer us a serious critique within the context of our own worldview. So you've given like this really good argument that Huxley has a sympathy for the worldview of the world of Brave New World, but I'd still kind of like giving him the grace I would to another artist. I'd still say artists like to fight with themselves. They almost like to perform their characters. So the thing that's actually kind of making me most resonate with your argument is how good Mustafa Mann's argument is. And so the question comes down to, is Huxley in Huxley's own mind? Does he agree with Mustafa Mann, and that's why he makes Mustafa Mann so eloquent in making the argument? Or is Huxley kind of fighting with himself, and he's playing the part of Mustafa Mann and giving the best argument he can for Mustafa Mann, even if Yeah, it almost comes down to a question of like, is who you are as an artist different than who you are, maybe in your political thought or in your upbringing. So, yeah.
I think there could definitely be a separation, and the example that I would deploy in that case would be Alan Moore.
Yeah, Alan Moore hates subjectivism, but he can't help but make can't help but make Rorschach a compelling character.
Right.
Yeah, so essentially what you would propose then is that Brave New World is like the first step along his journey to accepting that his family is correct, and that in fact we should have this, UNESCO New World Order that controls people through
or arguing with himself about it. Like, I think artists always, like if an artist, like I'm a capitalist, right? But if I have a socialist character, I want the socialist character to be a character. So it's like, I'll play pretend that I'm a socialist. But when I'm playing pretend that I'm a socialist, I don't want to be a dumb socialist. I want to be a smart socialist. It's more fun to inhabit the world if you sort of let go of yourself and become that character for a while. So it's almost like I'm always careful to see a fictional world as a simple political narrative, unless there's a sort of like an Aesop's fables moral interpretation of the narrative. What you've the challenge you've kind of presented is that the typical Aesop's fable moral interpretation of Brave New World is this society is bad. This society will rob us of our humanity and our freedom. And you've given us some biographical information about Huxley to suggest that maybe there's a second element to this, where not only does he sort of see the eternal logic of the Brave New World, but he does want it, and something like that. And then you'd say like the island is an example of him actually saying, yeah, I actually would something like this. Maybe if we just maybe we just didn't have. Okay, so does this might be important. Is there art in the island? Is there freedom of speech in the island, or do they have to eliminate art and culture there too?
Yes, well, he does have culture there, which again gets back to this idea that I was saying before. He is part of this upper class, and they are trained in the value of art and Shakespeare and things. So I think he does have some genuine sympathies towards Shakespeare and culture, as well as animosity towards consumerism and like lowbrow culture, right? Like he might be the kind of guy that would be like an Ayn Rand type, who's always going off about Beethoven, and then kind of hates comic books and crappy stuff like that. So that would be the
TV is ruining the kids' brains.
Yeah. That I think that's a genuine position that he probably held all his life, because but both the books demonstrate that sort of position. And just knowing, the kind of posh upper class British people, I mean that would be a reasonable supposition. I think where he's very sold on is this idea of the mechanism of the Brave New World. Again, the drugs, the sex, the destruction of family, the lack of all these other things. But as far as art and culture goes, I think I'd be inclined to agree with you, Mom, especially in light of the fact that it shows up in both Brave New World and the island. So, obviously you'd have to go back in time and ask him if you really want to get into his head.
Yeah.
But I think it's very unlikely that he wrote Brave New World thinking, oh yeah, this is really terrible. I think he deliberately did insert a lot of sympathies, because he had these sympathies, and he was part of this group who unironically wanted to see a world order at least somewhat similar to this. They'd have kind of disagreements about things like with Orwell and Huxley, right? You don't see the exact same vision for the future, and Huxley has a more optimistic vision, Orwell has a more pessimistic vision. but the basic pattern of, there will be a world government, and that this government will involve social controls on people, cultural controls on people, based around principles of science. I think that was very much taken for granted and expected and even desired.
How much of this do you think is generational? So if you go back to that generation, like I can't help but like notice that,
I was about to ask that same question.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton were worried about the same thing. So everybody quotes Lewis and Chesterton because they say, oh yeah, they're talking about the problems we have today.
Yeah, well, they saw it coming. They were in the same sort of milieu. They were just hanging out in different cliques, right?
Yeah.
They were kind of the based kids who were sitting around doing the dank troll memes, seeing all the woke kids, running around doing all the woke memes, and they were like, "Hey, watch out, future!" Right? They had the same sort of schooling. They were in the same sort of social classes. They probably hung out with each other at some point. I wouldn't be surprised. So
I want you to be honest. Was 4chan a part of your journey into galaxy brain territory on Aldous Huxley at all?
No, actually, I don't think. Have they ever done like Huxley memes on 4chan?
That's the problem. Is they do a lot of, well, it's mostly anti-Semitic stuff, but they do a lot of deep dive kind of stuff
that would be
on Weird Stuff.
Though, if they've ever caught on to it. There is like I've said, there have been people who've remarked on it before. I think the like conspiracy theory, like fun stuff. Again, James Corbett has mentioned it. James, I don't think James would go as far as I would. He has done a lot of the stuff on like the Huxley family, but he hasn't really staked a position on whether Huxley was pro Brave New World or not.
Okay.
But yeah, again, I think if you dive into his history, and I think you Right Geek and Mom, you've both correctly identified things that are kind of weird about the book that seem almost positive, and I would say that those are deliberate. I think he's much too smart and much too good a writer to have done that by accident.
So if you're right, it would make Brave New World like the most successful piece of seditious art of all time, because it seems to be presenting the exact opposite message.
Possibly,
right?
Yes. Possibly. I actually don't think it was all that successful though, because again, I think that Brave New World. Oh God! Actually, this might have been Gamergate. There might have been something in Gamergate that kind of helped me along my journey of Brave New World.
Did it have something to do with? Okay, did it have something to do with how Brave New World is almost talking about gaming? What was interesting is when he talks about feelies, I can't help but think about virtual reality, and it's someone in the early 1900s trying to describe virtual reality without the language for it.
Yeah. Well, that in particular, that's one of the things that I liked about the book the first time I read it, because they're like, oh, cool, video games. But somebody once said that Brave New World was essentially the Clinton era United States, right? Like it was basically just a description of the 90s in the United States. And I think it was, I don't think it's all that far off. And as we kind of get away from that Brave New World order towards the Orwellian world order, right? Again, going back to this idea of Orwell and Huxley having this conversation, I'm really starting to miss Huxley. I wish it was more successful, actually.
I would. Have you ever read that letter I referenced earlier of Huxley and Orwell communicating?
No, I wasn't aware of it, but it fits in very neatly. I'm not surprised.
So look for it, because maybe one hole I'll punch in your theory is when he's talking with Orwell privately about it. He seems to be scared of, Huxley sounds like he's scared of the New World Order, and his criticism of Orwell is he thinks, well, I like your book, but I think my version of it is more likely than your version of it, which means that Huxley's in his mind sort of connecting his vision of the New World Order with Orwell's vision of the New World Order. Huxley just sees his as maybe like more a velvet glove version of it, and one he personally thinks is more likely to happen than the Orwell style of it. But It would mean he'd have to be lying to himself or lying to Orwell, even in like his private communications with Orwell.
Well, again, I mean, it's possible that he's developing his thoughts as time goes along, but I'd have to ask, like, what aspect of his Brave New World order is he worried about? Again, is it all the mechanical stuff, or is it just the fact that, you know, the culture that he loves and cherishes is being destroyed?
Okay, it's almost like it's like an intellectual socialist who wants socialism so they can be the smart. They think they'll be the smart leader in the socialist world. Is Huxley scared that the Brave New World is going to come about, or is he scared that if the Brave New World comes about, it'll take away from him things that he likes, like the artistic expressiveness of the world?
The second option is very possible, I think. Like, well, a couple of things that I wanted to say is it is possible that Huxley is someone who is definitely sympathetic to certain aspects of this New World Order based on his history and kind of the milieu in which he lives. But he could also at the same time be a dissenter from it, because there are certain, like you said, like we've been saying, there are certain aspects of the New World Order and Brave New World that he definitely seems to take a critical stance towards. And then the other thing that was brought up in the discussion so far is the fact that it is possible that what we're looking at is an author who is slowly wrestling with ideas in his milieu that he has come into contact with, and that what we are seeing is sort of a gradual evolution of his ideas. I know this is certainly true with other authors that I have read. Like, for example, among kind of my milieu, so to speak, one author that we admire very much is Robert A. Heinlein. And one of the things about Robert A. Heinlein is that over the course of his career, he evolved philosophically and went off into philosophical branches that those of us who kind of more on the, you know, conservative Christian end of the scale are going to be like, no, like, but because he was, again, another artist that was wrestling with ideas that he maybe found sympathetic on a certain level, but he was also, you know, gradually developing his thought. And over time, I think the reason why the people in my milieu like him is that over time, he became more and more recognizably libertarian. And since I hang out with a lot of libertarians, I think that's why he's a touch to him for him. But he certainly did not start off that way. If you pick up, you know, some of Heinlein's earlier works back when he was, you know, a Democrat and all of that, then what you get is something completely different, right? He evolved over time. And the other thing one last thing I was going to say is the question that Marm raised about, is this generational? I think is a very good and pointed question, because one of the things about the authors, the science fiction authors that came up in Robert A. Heinlein's time, is that they all assumed one world government, and they all assumed that basically that Malthus was right, and that eventually our population is going to completely overtake the world, and we won't have enough resources to feed everyone. They basically all believed that. Yeah, they all believed that no matter what, you know, no matter whether they were at the time recognized as progressive or whether they were recognized as more libertarian, they all had that belief, because that was just a general belief, generational belief that everyone had. So I think
Thanos and Avengers for all of the
maybe be
Hello?
Oh, hello, Reiki.
Yeah.
Did you cut off?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm there. Okay.
You all right? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Well,
Yep.
yeah, we can hear you
Yeah.
now. I was going to ask. Well, one thing. I think they kind of all have this idea of world government because it's been taught to them in schools. Like usually these individuals are, again, like they're very well educated. They come from the same sort of cultural and class backgrounds, and this idea of the inevitability of one world government, or the desirability of world government and centralization and government control is just inculcated into the ruling class from birth.
World War One. Think about what World War One did to that generation. Like if you lived through World War One, you'd start being tempted by that idea. I kind of see Lord of the Rings, that people say, "Oh, is Lord of the Rings about World War II?" Now, if any World War had an impact on Lord of the Rings, it was World War One, because it's more like this idea of a war that leaves a lasting impact that's destructive, even if the good guys win the war. World War One leaves this lasting fear of war that essentially creates the peace movement out of a genuine fear that we could actually all kill each other in one of these world wars.
Yeah, I mean, Bertrand Russell made that very explicit. The war connection. He wrote a number of pieces espousing the need for a new world order, based on this idea of we've come to a point in technological development where another world war will blow us all up. It's the World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones kind of idea. But I was actually going to ask, was Heinlein, did he eventually turn into a libertarian then, or? I'm not too familiar with him, but I remember.
Yeah, he's generally recognized to be. Yeah.
Okay, because
he's generally recognized to be libertarian now, especially later in life.
When I was in the military, I remember I got a talk from my drill sergeant, or not the drill sergeant, but the commander of our company who was telling us all about how Heinlein was the greatest thing that ever happened, and how we had to read Starship Troopers, and how it was the model for the world and everything. And I didn't really think of it as being particularly libertarian, but he turned libertarian later.
Well, that's what I'm saying. See, Starship Troopers was an early career book of his. So, but if you look at some of the later career, you see more of what. Okay, so you have Starship Troopers, which was 1959, I believe, because I believe it won the 1960 Hugo Award. So that was written in 1959, and then some years later, he wrote "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress," which is absolutely libertarian. So I think so that's what I'm saying. Like, there's. What we have in the case of Robert A. Heinlein is an author who is playing with ideas and evolving as he thinks about these ideas.
He repudiates them as he goes along.
As he goes along.
I haven't read Moon is a Harsh Mistress, but I'll have to check that one out then. Because I usually don't like to read libertarian things, because I don't like to read things that just kind of confirm what I already believe. But what
did you think? Nice. What did you think of BioShock? Did you ever play BioShock?
BioShock. Oh God. I know people. Do we have time to really get into BioShock? Maybe we can do a whole stream on BioShock. But I actually I had a weird take on BioShock.
I don't even know about BioShock.
I think on one level, because there was this big hullabaloo.
I'm not a gamer, so I don't know.
All right. Well, it was this video game about an undersea, supposedly
objectivist Ayn Randian kind of world.
Rand, paradise where big rich businessmen would go to be completely free and do whatever they want under the ocean, and it winds up turning into this big drugged out ghetto and everything. And at the time, it was touted as like, oh, it's all about Ayn Rand, and it's this great Randian story. And I think I didn't really get that much Randianism about it. I think it's kind of like the undergrad read one Ayn Rand thing and then sort of scribbles off a bunch of stuff about how much he hates it. I do think that there were some aspects of it that you could connect to objectivism. Like I'm not a big fan of objectivism, just to let you know, disclaimer. Like I think she's right in a lot of ways, but incorrect in
it's almost like she has a cult of personality around her brand of libertarianism.
The dear leader. But I think I think one of the great tragedies of BioShock, and this is just me, like I haven't seen anybody else kind of try and argue it, and I definitely don't think the guy who wrote it intended it this way, but I think the great tragedy of BioShock was that the objectivist plan wasn't followed. I think it started as an objectivist idea that quickly perverted itself into socialism and totalitarianism, and that was the great tragedy of BioShock. It wasn't that it was objectivist. It was that it was not objectivist enough. It was insufficiently objectivist to maintain itself, and instead you had a collapse of the society. Although I do think that that part where everybody dies because they can't afford oxygen, I do think that Ayn Rand would have supported that. I do think that's legitimately objective. I was very happy with that one. Well, because it's under the ocean and it's not a scarce resource. Like the whole reason why oxygen is free is because it's a scarce, a non-scarce resource that we can just get anywhere. But being that this is underneath the ocean, you need to pay someone for that.
The other libertarian thing I think would be fun for a future discussion would be T.H. White's The Once and Future King. I read it for the first time recently, and I liked about half of it. The only problem is I felt like the last half of The Once and Future King turns into a strange political treatise on libertarian anarchy.
Really?
But
I haven't read that since I was like 12, but I never knew that. But maybe that's where I got it from. I used to love that book. I remember.
And I do want to point out, Punchy, if you do in fact seek out The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, when I say Heinlein is libertarian, I'm not saying that he's an ideological libertarian. I'm just saying that he's kind of a small L in a sense. Yeah,
I don't really care. One of the nice things, I mean, I'm not really a libertarian either. I'm more of like a voluntarist, which is like the weirdo libertarians. So one of the great things about it is that you don't have to agree with anyone about anything, and you can still be fine with it, right? So
the one I've just been sort of doing Google research on, so I'm not like reading anything scholarly, but I'm just like listening to videos and podcasts about this. There's a weird I kind of mentioned this earlier when talking about theocracy, but there's like a weird libertarian theocracy subsection of Christianity that I find. My video on Rushdoony and was it Rothschild? Not Rothschild. Who's the famous libertarian?
Shut down again. You mentioned
Rothbard. Yeah.
Oh, Murray Rothbard.
Yeah, Rothbard versus Rushdoony. That was kind of like an interesting little. Like super Christian Calvinist libertarian versus sort of more traditional secular libertarian. It's interesting how a lot of these subgroups have like a history of, I don't know, like politics between who's cool and who's not in all of these circles.
You said Rothman, like M-A-N?
No, I was thinking of Rothschild by accident. I was Murray Rothbard. Yeah. Right?
Isn't he Jewish? I could have sworn he was Jewish. I didn't know.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So he would have been the more secular Jewish perspective, and Rushdoony would have been.
He's not.
Rushdoony would have been kind of like the hyper Calvinist libertarian perspective. So I don't know. I only bring that up just like it's interesting how if you have like a label like libertarian, then you get it. It's like those 14-year-old political ideology memes where there are like 60 different branches of libertarianism all at war with each other.
Yeah. Well, it's the same way with anything, really. I mean, you got the National Socialists fighting the Marxist-Leninist Socialists, fighting the Trotskyite Socialists, fighting the Democratic Socialists. I mean, it's all.
why would that undermine the New World Order, though? Right? Like, wouldn't there be enough variations on New World Orderism to basically keep the New World Order from being a unified unit? Like, you could have like Bill Gates over here with his idea for it, and you could have
I think that's one like why we haven't seen it happen yet, and I think it's also maybe two why 1984 is coming a lot more true than anything else, because we're kind of separating into our own little Oceania, East Asia, Eurasia camps, right? Specifically because there's people with different sort of visions for
we almost can't kick, even if you are an internationalist, you can't kick nationalism out of people entirely. Like, it was Marx's problem. Like, Russian blacksmiths and American blacksmiths don't see each other as, well, we're all blacksmiths. The American blacksmiths see themselves as Americans.
Yeah, I mean, even today, I mean, again, we had this discussion with people on Twitter before,
right?
And with Matt and everything, and with people in his Twitter too, about how intersectionalism has even made it that nationalism doesn't work anymore, because all the gays, the gay men hate the lesbians, and the lesbians hate the trans, and the trans hate the TERFs, and the TERFs hate the the black people, and the black people hate the Mexicans, and the Mexican, and everybody just kind of hates each other now. So it's workers of the world balkanize is the but I actually did find that letter that you were talking about, and I read through it real quick. It's actually kind of funny because I mean he's very, very into this sort of new age mumbo jumbo kind of stuff, which is funny for somebody who's also into science. A lot of this letter is this the letter that he's talking, like half of it's about hypnotism, and about how hypnotism is going to be the way forward, or is it a different letter?
That sounds right. It is addressed to Orwell, right?
Yeah.
I just know there's one specific
he probably
quote.
wrote different.
I think there's one specific quote where the substance of the quote is, I think it's more likely that this world will have a soft approach. People will love their slavery.
Okay. In other words, I feel that the nightmare of 1984 is destined to modulate into the nightmare of a world having more resemblance to that which I imagined in Brave New World. The change will be brought about as a result of felt need for increased efficiency. That one
sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible that he was worried about it, but again, I think the main worry that he has is not so much the mechanisms behind it, but the intent behind it, right?
Which is very possible, because a lot of people who in the sort of elite intellectual class in that generation had that sort of flaw about them, in which they for some reason, based on how they thought, they did not see any errors in the mechanisms themselves. They were always focused on the intent. What's your goal?
You think you're the good guy, right? You always think you're the good guy. Yeah. When you imagine yourself taking the Ring of Power, you don't say to yourself, "Ha! I'm going to be Sauron now.
I'll defeat Sauron." Yeah.
You think, I'm going to defeat Sauron, and I'm going to be
libertarian.
The savior. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, libertarian.
So do we have any?
Thomas Sowell calls this the vision of the anointed.
Yeah.
Very, very much. I think you hit it. Yeah, hit it completely.
I was going to ask, do we have any more?
In the book of that title, he really does hit on the head how that particular intellectual class thinks. And and one of the things he highlights is it's not about the results of what I do or the process by which I do the thing that I want to do, but it's all about my goal. Whereas he says the contrasting worldview, which he calls the quote unquote benighted worldview, is that process does matter and results do matter. So what we may be running into then is that Huxley, like a lot of people in the sort of elite artistic class, just has a lot of the kind of intellectual flaws of many people of his class, and that what he worried about, I think, in Brave New World is all the things that people of his class would consider sort of beneath them, essentially. And then there were other aspects to it that I am kind of persuaded that he was somewhat sympathetic to some aspects of that society, just because I think it was probably generational on his part, that a lot of people who had some education and were fairly affluent had those assumptions lurking in their intellectual thought that, if we could just engineer society in a particular way.
Especially the people whose brothers founded UNESCO. I think the set of people whose brothers founded UNESCO were probably pretty interested in things like UNESCO. But
But then you get to the death of the author question. Like, you get to the death of the author question. So it is possible. I am persuaded that it is possible he was sympathetic to some aspects of the society that he created in Brave New World. But does that change? Should that change? Yeah. Should that change how we read it?
So I think I've actually talked with Punchy about my love-hate relationship with the phrase "death of the author." What I hate about the phrase "death of the author" is it became a meme, and then people basically just use it as a way to say, "Well, the author doesn't matter; it's just how you feel about it." And I hate that. The actual idea, the actual essay on the death of the author is more about saying you shouldn't reduce an artwork to the life circumstances of the author, because that makes reading art basically an exercise of just reading biographical data and then coming to a hard determination based on biographical data. So it's almost like more an anti-modernist statement. And I don't like kind of like the harsh, hyper rationalistic modernist perspective either. So actually I kind of agree with the actual point the death of the author was trying to make. I just hate what it's become. Like, I don't care what the words say. To me, it means to me it means whatever I want it to mean.
So keep them in mind, but kind of ignore them if you want to.
I would say you need. I'm more like a originalist, where like if you actually want to read the thing, you have to like read the language. You have to look at the grammar. It's kind of like that fastidious stuff we talked about in The Giver, right? Where precision of language actually is a good thing, even if it's like exaggerated to ridiculous proportions in the world of The Giver. The problem it always comes down.
Do you really mean ridiculous, Marmaduke? Is that the right word for it? Doesn't that mean that you should be ridiculing it? I mean, I think the precision of language is a very good thing, a very laudable thing. So isn't there a better word that you can find rather than ridiculous?
So here's a fine distinction. I think the thing that throws a monkey wrench into it is the fact that we're talking about art, and art is a thing that doesn't serve a utilitarian rationalistic purpose, but human beings like it. So if a work of art can have objective significance, if I paint a painting of the Virgin Mary, it's not a painting of a Buddhist deity or a Hindu deity, right? Like there's objective content to the work. At the same time, I think human interpretation and human feeling about it colors it. So like studying art is different than trying to talk about science or the ways chemicals interact with each other. So it actually could be true that if Huxley was part of the New World Order, his art could take on a life beyond Huxley's intent, where talking about the Brave New World becomes a way for people to talk about, well, this is what I hate about the New World Order. And it wouldn't matter if Huxley intended it to be pro New World Order, it wouldn't matter if people who read it and interpreted it began to use it as a language to say, oh, great, we're starting to live in the Brave New World, right? That the impact it would have on the culture would become separate from the original thing itself. A great example is The Prince, right? So The Prince, everybody, thinks, oh, The Prince is about how totalitarianism is good. But if you hear like an Italian Renaissance guy talk about the prince, they're going to be a lot more nuanced and say, well, Machiavelli was a Republican, so you have to look at the prince in the context of the collapse of the Florentine Republic, right? So there's the sort of layman's understanding of the prince. The prince must have absolute power and must be a tyrant. There's the academic understanding of the prince, which is more like, oh, consider this is Machiavelli, the Republican, trying to grapple with the problem of the collapse of the Florentine Republic, right? Both of them kind of matter. Like the academic scholarly thing matters if you actually want to understand what happened in history, if you want to kind of like remove anachronism from it. But anachronism is actually important because it affects how we look at and talk about art. And maybe we can never fully get past our anachronisms. You can look at a work of art and say, well, this is completely historically inaccurate in, Julius Caesar's, William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar doesn't really have anything to do with the actual history of Julius Caesar, but it's a really fascinating take on Julius Caesar that shows you a lot about what William Shakespeare thought of politics in Elizabethan England. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you're trying to get at, Marm, if I could formulate my own understanding of what you're saying.
So what you really say?
No, I'm not being like that. So what you're really saying is we should be like the lobsters. No,
yep, I hate women.
No, what I'm saying is,
you got me.
Yeah. What you're really saying is you hate women. Yeah. No. What you're saying, if I'm trying to figure out how to formulate what I'm thinking in my head, because I think in pictures, not words. What you're saying is that there's the words on the page, but at the time that the words were written, they were understood in a particular way. And we do have to be aware of how those words were understood and not like impose our own modern understandings of what the words say. Is that what you're trying to say?
Right. You're trying to do two things at once. You're trying to say, in this example, if Aldous Huxley was pro-New World Order, it doesn't matter to his readers who read it and interpret it as anti-New World Order. Yeah. If we accept Punchy Sonichu's interpretation, it would mean we'd have to kind of like put aside our anachronistic understandings and try to get to actually interpret Huxley. We'd have to like perform constitutional scholar work and pull out the diagrams and diagram every sentence to try to reconstruct Huxley's thinking while making his art. And I almost don't like to do that too much with art because it's sort of like you're missing the forest. You're missing the forest by fixating on the trees. Huxley's view is important, but do we want to?
Yeah, I don't know if it would go so far as sure.
Okay. I was going to say the thing about constitutional originalism, though, is that the way I understand it, it's not that we're looking deep into the psychology and backgrounds of the gentleman who wrote that document. What we're looking at is how did the general public understand those words when they wrote them, and how did the assembled people who constructed the Constitution, right? How did they understand those words?
And there's a little
originalism. You're not doing this deep psychological dive into Madison and Jefferson and all of those people and trying to figure out what they intended. What you're looking at is how did the public understand what was written.
Well, I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of two different questions that kind of two different questions that you're posing here. And again, like as I said earlier, I do think that the sort of general public reaction to Brave New World, especially at the time, was that it was a dystopia. Most people consider it a dystopia. I think that interpretation is, obviously, populations change over time. I think a lot of that has kind of slouched away as time goes on. Again, for me, it really didn't seem that bad. I can't imagine what kids today who've barely even heard of Christianity, and many of them haven't even really heard of families, sadly enough. They might not even realize that that's the kind of way they have to approach it. So but I think I would agree with you, Mom, that in his day most people would have viewed it as a dystopia. But I'm not so sure that the forest itself is that way, right? I think that if you just look at the forest as the thing itself, right, without bringing your own interpretations into it, or even without bringing the author's interpretations into it either, because I do think that Huxley was very much in favor of this system, at least mechanically. I think he was, like the difference between like intentional ethics and consequentialism.
As you were saying, he had an issue. He had an issue with the intent behind the use of the mechanism, and he also had issues with some of the results if the results led to a destruction of art and a destruction of culture.
He's very much concerned about keeping the world the way that he wants it to be, like most people are. Most would-be tyrants would want the world to be in accordance to their vision, and he's worried more about is your intent to get rid of the parts of the free society that I like. But I think that if we just look at the book as the book, without worrying about the author and without worrying about people in the 1930s and 1940s and how they would have reacted to it, because both of you, Right Geek and Marmaduke, even before I started giving you my Galaxy take, you were already starting to notice this pattern. We saw, that the book's really not that creepy or really not that bad, and there's elements there, and I think that's the key. I think he was writing this. I mean, he was a very intelligent man. He was very highly educated. It's a popular book, right? It's not some ivory tower book, but I think he's definitely smart enough to have done that on purpose, and I really do think that he anticipated people being smart enough to pick up on that. And it's definitely contained within the book. Like if you look at the book in a completely neutral or as neutral as possible way, I think you'll find that it's actually a good deal more positive than people give it credit for.
It's a lot like whether
fair enough,
I was just going to say, it reminds me of like Paradise Lost and how Satan is portrayed as an intelligent opponent to God, and that's led to this. Is John Milton the Puritan saying Satan is bad? Well, that's the obvious interpretation. Or is he seditiously saying that Satan has a point, and it's led some people to idolize John Milton's view of Satan. That's one of the reasons that Lewis didn't like Paradise Lost too much, is he thought it overemphasized how smart Satan is.
There was something just kind of somewhat of a tangent, but there was something that really stood out to me. Years back, I was in an art history class, and I think we were interpreting some image based on Paradise Lost or something like that, and we were discussing Luciferianism. And I remember I made like a comment about how like the modern world is essentially Luciferian now, so we don't really care. And everyone was just kind of like, yeah, that's true. And they all kind of nodded along. And I remember after I'd said that, I was like, wait a minute. like that's kind of bizarre that you can just say that and that everybody just kind of accepts it as true without even questioning it. And again, like I don't come from a Christian background or very Christian background.
It's like the dude bros out there saying Chris was right.
It just being like, oh yeah, okay. I guess maybe they were right, but and I guess just to bring it back to Huxley, right? Audiences change over time, and I think the argument about people like these CIA analyst guys who are talking about predictive programming in popular media, I think the thing that they kind of bring up as the reason behind it is that you get so used to having these narratives over the years, right? Like that the Overton window shifts. Like you guys know about the Overton window,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
that's kind of like been made normie. Yeah,
that's pretty normie. It comes. Well, I don't know if it actually comes from this, but it's part of that whole overall idea. Like it's the range of things that are acceptable in a society. And if you see the society with these crazy ideas in the form of fiction, like, oh God, zombies walking around the streets and bacteria getting into your bloodstreams, and now we got a civil war and everyone's fighting, right? Then when it actually happens, it doesn't seem so weird, right? Like if it happened 20 years ago, before anybody had seen The Purge or had seen Hunger Games or had all this kind of stuff going on, people would have been like, no, this is crazy, fuck off. But now that we already have this idea in our head, you just kind of be like, oh yeah, it's like Resident Evil, right? Like I don't know if you guys remember one of the very early memes from the whole bat definitely not engineered situation going on that Google's going to shut us down for. But did you see the Resident Evil meme?
I'm not too familiar with Resident Evil, so I'd need someone to explain
the
this
umbrella
connection.
cult. Okay, well, Resident Evil. I mean, it's a video game about zombies, and the whole conceit is that there's a evil company called Umbrella Corporation, with a little umbrella logo.
Symbol, yeah.
Yeah,
and they unleash the zombie virus.
They unleash zombie virus. They're involved in biotech, and they create plagues that go out and kill off the world, and it's all horrible. Like,
so the natural response, if you're familiar with the pop culture representation, is to sort of joke and say, well, how about that? Now we're living in this absurd situation. No?
Well, here's the thing, because some images showed up purporting to be from the Wuhan viral lab. There was like some Snopes article saying no, it was actually from like a couple miles away from a different biotech company or something. But their symbol was the Umbrella Corp umbrella, just color switched to blue instead of red, and it was crazy. But I remember once that started circulating on social media, people were all just kind of like, oh, that's crazy, but shrug. Figures, right? Like people become so used to these kinds of things that when something actually
I don't think
happens,
there's not anything necessarily. Yeah.
So the thing is, when PolitiFact says that's fake, I hate PolitiFact, so I almost think, well, that's an argument for why it could be true, right? But on the other hand, that's also
fake?
so funny, right? Like I would want to create that image to tell that joke, right? So that's kind of like what keeps me from going full. What always keeps me from like going fully into kind of like the Alex Jones way of thinking and sort of staying in the I find Alex Jones funny perspective is. I can see how I would have fun making up that image, right?
Oh yeah, I would definitely enjoy making up that image too. I mean, it was on their website as well. If I remember correctly, the debunking claim was again that it was something that it wasn't in the city. It was an institute like 10 or 20 miles outside of the city or something like that. Like the original claim had been that it was in the middle of the city, and that claim was false.
Like that matters?
False or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I remember checking out the website, and unless somebody had hacked their website as well, it was definitely definitely.
So there actually is a real nugget to this.
Yeah, it may not have been the exact company that allegedly it didn't actually unleash it. Please don't shut us down, Google. But Daily Mail is fake news.
If it were a conspiracy theory, you could never trust the mainstream media to report it accurately.
It was a weird coincidence, and it was the sort of thing. And even if it was completely false, which it may well have been completely false, I don't put any stock in it whatsoever. But the reaction by the people, again, getting back to this Huxley thing and what you were saying, Mom, the reaction of the people was just kind of like a collective gasp, followed very quickly by a collective shrug, and like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. let's just go on with Clown World, right?
I got you. Meme perspective almost sort of looks at these things, and it almost doesn't matter if it's real or true or not. It more matters if it'd be kind of like ironically funny, right?
Well, but partially, I think
I
the main takeaway here is that it just leads to kind of a desensitization and a black pill, right? Like it gets you into the doomer mood where when you see these things happen, right, because you've already become accustomed to it, you're just like, okay, well, whatever. Like if something really crazy happened tomorrow, like I don't know, like Mexico suddenly dropped bombs on Canada, and the big horrible thing was Mexico's invading Canada, right? Like nobody would have seen that coming, and everyone would be like, "What the hell's going on?" Right? But if you see something that you've seen in the media over and over and over again, and like, oh look, like the alien disclosure thing, which is always
that's like on Twitter right now. Like, are they going to reveal the existence of aliens?
And that is actually being pushed by people like the Rothschilds and the Clintons and the CIA, and James Corbett also does a really good expose on that, how to fake a alien invasion, which I would recommend anyone to watch. But something like that, like if that was to happen tomorrow, people, like, it would be crazy. But the dirty secret though is that in addition to like mainstream media articles doing pieces on aliens, there are also people telling jokes about it because it's kind of funny, right? And they're also competing. They're also competing conspiracy. This is one of my favorite things. There are people who are, because they're conspiracy theorists, they won't believe certain conspiracy theories because those conspiracy theories could be false flags from the glowies, right? Like you could believe that aliens are real and the government's trying to cover it up. You could believe that aliens aren't real and the government's trying to trick us into believing in aliens. Yeah, well, that's one of the test cases. Like I always like to look at someone and see what their position on disclosure is. Like David Icke, he tends to get promoted a lot in mainstream media, and he's very much in favor of disclosure. So that's how you know, man, that the conspiracy theorist is crazy, man, that he's one of them. But you know what I mean? So.
This is going to be a bit of a sharp topic shift, but I had an Aldous Huxley related book recommendation that I thought both of you and the audience might.
Huxley? No, we can't talk about Huxley on this channel.
Back to the peanut brain takes on Aldous Huxley. Yeah,
let's not talk about Huxley.
I think it's called The Great Debate by Peter Kreeft, a Catholic author, and Aldous Huxley, C.S. Lewis, and John F. Kennedy all died on the same day. So Peter Kreeft has the three of them meet in purgatory to have a dialogue, and it's basically just a smooth-brained John F. Kennedy getting absolutely trounced by Aldous Huxley and C.S. Lewis, who are having a debate.
Why is C.S. Lewis in purgatory? What did he do?
Well, I don't know. I think that Peter Kreeft actually, Reiki might know more about this than I would, but I think that Peter Kreeft actually has had like an impact on Catholic theories of purgatory because he likes to write books or write scenarios where everybody meets in purgatory and has like this great Socratic debate. And it's always, I almost think there ought to be a video on.
Well, purgatory, the thing about, if I could clarify the Catholic understanding of purgatory, it is a place where you are purified by fire in a sense, but it's not meant to be a punishment. You're getting to heaven eventually. It's just that you have to like clear out all of the flaws in your character that made you a sinner in the first place. Like, so it's not like C.S. Lewis did anything wrong, quote. I mean, he probably, what it is he did do things wrong in the normal human sense that every human being is a sinner. And so you have purgatory as this, wonderful place where you can be cleansed of all the things that make you a sinner. Furries. Like,
he did start the furry fandom. He was very much into funny animal stories. So that alone. But I was going to say I actually can't. I was looking for that debate, and I didn't find the C.S. Lewis Aldous Huxley debate, but I did find a whole bunch of stuff on the Granddaddy Huxley debates, the Huxley Wilberforce debates. about Darwin and stuff, but the Oxford evolution debates. So
I got the title wrong. It's Between Heaven and Hell.
Oh, okay. Between Heaven and Hell. But yeah, I mean, if you're ever interested in like old Darwin, 19th century kind of fedora tipping, definitely look up Thomas Huxley and all that other kind of stuff going on.
The guys Richard Dawkins calls the old stupid atheists, right?
Well, I think Dawkins is pretty positive about Huxley. If I remember correctly, he was actually the one that I found out about Huxley from. I can't really imagine who else I would have read him from, because usually, I mean, I used to read a lot of Dawkins, and I used to read a lot of Gould, and I used to read a lot of what's his name? Why People Believe Weird Things. I got the guy that got cancelled.
Sam Harris.
No, not Sam Harris. No, not that commie. The
Christopher Hitchens.
No, not Hitchens. He's even more of a commie. I mean, I did. God, why can't I think of his name? Well, anyways, because Gould was Michael Sherman.
Yeah, and I was thinking Christopher Hitchens earlier because Peter Hitchens is very, very conservative. So,
yeah.
Well, no. Michael
Okay.
Sherman. Yeah. He was always my favorite.
Yeah.
And Gould I really like too.
Yeah.
Sherman's pretty atheisty, but he doesn't really spurg about atheism. He's more just spurging against conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And Gould just kind of didn't really care. Like he was very sort of proletarian and commie. So I think Dawkins was probably the one that would have been spurging about how great Thomas Huxley was, because he seems like the kind that would really get knee deep into that. But yeah, that was the like grandfather, I think, or great grandfather. He's like the family patriarch that Aldous comes from. So just if you ever want to dig into Aldous's history, I mean, it's still on the ClearNet. It has not been memory hold. There's a lot of weird connections, and he's definitely part of the upper crust.
You need to facilitate your Galaxy Brain take into the actual Galaxy Brain meme and send that to the right geek so she can use that for the thumbnail of this video.
Well, I don't want to spoil anything for people, but yeah, let me see. Aldous Huxley. Yeah, and I did not know that he had taught Orwell. I mean, I might have heard it at some point, but again, that doesn't surprise me in the least, because
his French teacher.
Complete sense. Yeah, especially French. I mean, the French philosophers were all kind of loony and mush brained. Which again would get into the island, because one of the things with the island is that it's not exactly anti-rational, but it's more hippie than anything else. Like it's kind of the hippie take on Brave New World, where everyone's kind of lovey-dovey and just sort of stoners on the Indian beach, rather than rich scientists sitting in their Google labs.
The New Age mysticism comes out a lot in Between Heaven and Hell, so I think you'd resonate with that. Well, Lewis obviously and Huxley go at it over some of the New Age stuff, so I was kind of vaguely familiar with that through Kreeft. Yeah,
that would make sense too, because and I mean the New Age movement. We could get into all kinds of stuff with that too, because the New Age movement has kind of taken up the mantle of progressivism in many ways. I don't know if you guys, again, talking about conspiracy theorists, have you ever heard of TVC Mario or anything?
No.
Right? Did you ever see TVC Mario?
No.
Back when he was still a thing, he was actually really good. I mean, he was nutty, absolutely nutty, but he was like an evangelist Christian who used to be part of the New Age movement, and then he did a lot of really, really popular. Like Beyonce is an NWO shill kind of videos, where he'd show like music videos and break down all the different Freemason Illuminati symbols. It was incredibly popular on YouTube for years, but he kept getting shut down, and eventually he just said screw it and erased all of his channels. So I don't know if you can find it anymore. Like the only one
he needs a dedicated re-upload channel like a lot of people have.
Yeah, I think there might be stuff on BitChute, but like, have you ever heard of Call for an Uprising? That guy. Okay, well, because
you're deep into some interesting weeds, Punchy.
I can't believe. Well, yeah. Call for an Uprising I'm surprised he's still around. Like, he's still got videos up. Last I checked, but he was like the very angry. I could have sworn he was going to shoot someone at some point version of TVC Mario. Mario was kind of the more rational, intellectual one, and he actually had some good arguments. I think overall he was pretty nutty, but I think he did do a good job of showing at least like the occult sympathies of many music directors, which, you know, when you really start to look into it, it's not that weird. Like they're just admitting that everybody's a Luciferian nowadays. But you know, if you're not really thinking about it, it seems odd. So, yeah, he was.
Just FYI, I was talking about. Yeah, just FYI, I was talking about Heinlein earlier. Although Heinlein himself was never a Scientologist, there is Scientology does have a connection with those Campbellians. So,
yeah, Scientology does have.
That seems to be a thing that happens in artistic circles. Yeah, it does seem to be a thing that happens in certain artistic circles where they start to get enamored of really kooky ideas. The more they kind of drink their own ink.
Again, at the risk of, you know, getting us shut down again, you know, the H guy, if you know who I'm talking about,
okay.
You know, he was an artist, and he was actually really into all these weird like mesmerism stuff that Huxley was discussing in his book to, or in this letter to Orwell, right? Like he had and most of the people that he was involved with as well, like Goebbels, and well, not so much Goebbels, but Himmler and things, right? They were all into this kind of weird new age hypnotism, mesmerism, Blavatsky, all that kind of stuff. You know, kind of like today when you get like the spirit.
I think it's another generational thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, this was all part of the milieu, right? There was a side of the upper class that was very like ultra rational, and there was a side that really wanted to just kind of let their hair down and be very romantic. And the romantic side tended to get into, you know, this sort of proto New Age occultism, and the rational side, you know, would kind of be there, getting away from it, but they all kind of agreed on many of the salient points, which I think you can discern if you read a lot of their literature, like Orwell and Huxley and these things.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I was okay. Just coughing. I got the coof. And Bertrand Russell.
Okay, well, we are Russell at the 2 remarks. Yeah.
So did we settle on what we want to do for a topic next time? We've done, what have we done? We did The Giver. I think we did Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451, The Giver.
Yeah. I missed Fahrenheit.
Well, since we were bringing him up, probably 1984 would be. Since we've been bringing him up, maybe 1984 would be.
I mean, is any dystopia discussion complete without a dedicated discussion of 1984?
Yeah, I mean that might get really depressing. Yeah. But yeah, I'd be fine with that. Yeah. If you want to do BioShock too, we could do a Let's Play and discuss it while Right Geek is trying to play it in the background. That would be fun.
I want a really obscure one. Like, what's one that's good that nobody has heard of ever?
Oh, well, I wouldn't know because I wouldn't have heard of it.
That's what
Well, I mean, like,
yeah.
that you have heard of, but the
Yeah.
normies haven't heard of.
Well, I was gonna suggest Kafka too.
Yeah, okay, maybe. Which one? Any in particular? Or just
Hang
kind
on,
of a
let me look up
smattering?
which one
I mean, they're usually pretty short.
There was
I
one
don't
that I
think he wrote
downloaded because
anything
I thought it was
particularly long.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the trial is the one I was thinking of. Because that's the one that goes into, oh, you've been accused of something and you don't understand even what you've been accused of.
Cancel
Which
culture.
The reason I was thinking of that one is I'm picking these on their relevance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the cancel culture book before there was even cancel culture.
Yeah.
And I mean, 1984 gets into that too, like the idea of
Right.
the sort of lawless.
Yeah, it's the trial by Kafka. Yeah. I have it downloaded here.
It
was one of those
actually,
things I was going to suggest.
Oh God. What was it called? Okay, well, I'm looking at Wikipedia's list of dystopian literature, and I don't know if Time Machine's on here, but that might be something that we could discuss with the kind of divide of the world between the based and the woke. But no, there was actually a book that when I used to work at university at the bookstore, they used to make all the women's studies students read it. And I don't remember what it was called, but maybe you guys have heard of it. It's about a future society. Sorry? The what?
Go ahead and describe it. I had a guess, but let me hear your description first.
Okay, well, it's about a future society in which feminists have taken over and they've killed every single man except for one. And they're like Nazis or something. And they shame the man and tell the man how bad he was. Is that what it's called?
I think it might actually be called something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that one was kind of nuts.
Was that okay? Wait, was that one saying that's a good thing or that's a bad thing?
I don't.
Wait a minute.
I don't know if it was.
I doubt. Now I am now terribly skeptical that I understand the things I thought I understood. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it would be good to find like super obscure ones.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was that one. I think there's something else that's even more explicitly fascist, which I don't remember, but it could be. I don't know.
The closest
it wasn't good, but it was kind of weird. So it was.
Probably we should also do Harrison Bergeron too.
That's a nice little short story, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not Swastika Night. Well, they have Animal Farm in here about. I don't know if that really qualifies as dystopia. It's more just an allegory of.
That's more of an allegory.
Yeah, it's real too. It's a historical historical faction.
Yeah.
But oh god, Lord of the Flies, would that be a dystopia?
I've never read it, but I think it would in the sense that it's like kind of children building a society for themselves, right?
Yeah. It's a bunch of little kids that if you ever seen the Simpsons episode where they get stuck on the island,
they crash away from civilization and then they eventually descend into barbarism, essentially.
Yeah.
But you know what? Heinlein actually wrote a response to that in which the descent into barbarism does not happen. So
I remember that. Actually, James Corbett, again, bringing up James, he did like a whole piece on that one because he really didn't like the implications of everyone descending into barbarism as soon as they're cut free from the government. But
yeah.
Well, this one says Atlas Shrugged was it? I mean, I guess they were living in a dystopia and they were rebelling against it.
I liked Anthem better because in Anthem, I felt like Ayn Rand edited her. I think a lot of good authors need an editor.
Yeah,
Ayn Rand's problem is 3,000 pages. You can say it in 300.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe Anthem, because that's
I
actually...
I think Anthem is the better work, yeah.
That's actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately, with all the focus on pronouns and how an awful lot of people have been switching over to plural pronouns, like they,
we,
instead of we, they, them, instead of us, and
the royal we,
and I mean that's kind of it's weird. And again, it gets my inner conspiracy theorist pricked up. Like I don't know. It's still too early to tell if this is part of the plan, but I think the whole commentary on pronouns, and of course Harrison Bergeron, that was really good. That's short. And, that's even more. Every day that's becoming more pertinent. I think it's kind of I'm at the point now where I'm not sure if we're more into Harrison or if we're more into 1984. I think we're kind of dimension merging between the two.
I think there's a combo. Yeah, I think there's a combo of a lot of things going on. Like, I don't think that we've left Brave New World behind exactly, because when I read Brave New World, there were things about it that I recognized in our own
society. I think
that
ended with Gamergate. I think Gamergate was the last hurrah of the brave new world, and we shall never see its like again. But
I always saw Gamergate as like the first start of something new, though, right? Because for me, it was like there was this. What was most interesting to me about Gamergate was it was kind of an atheist, millennial internet thing, where previously the culture war had always been like a Christian Republican versus progressive atheist sort of discussion, and Gamergate sort of changed the narrative a little bit, where Sargon of Akkad, like the head Gamergate guy is this British, friendly British atheist fellow,
the liberalist or whatever.
Oh yeah, liberalism. Fucking grief. Oh hey, Punchy, do you think that Quickville is a dystopia or a utopia?
Well, I mean, as a Punchy Sonichu, I would say that it's a utopia because, I have Magi-chan constantly getting into my head, so it's totally fine, and I have nothing at all bad to say about it.
Right, Geek? Are you following this at all?
Geek is familiar with Quickville. I mean, the normal. The standard take is that it's a dystopia, that it's some kind of hellish dystopia because it's mind control and thought control
but the author's intent is that it's a utopia.
Yeah, the author's intent is that it's a utopia, that it's a very almost like a Brave New World utopia where everyone is happy. It's very Epicurean. You have a mall where everyone can hang out and everything's great, but it's I think he's kind of like Brave New World if it was written by someone who wasn't able to make his case. Like that's kind of Quickville and Sonic. I think it's if you stuck Huxley, if you gave Huxley autism and stuck him in a room with Sonic the Hedgehog
and Pokemon cards, that's what he come up with.
That would have been what he would have come up with when he got older. Like his brothers would have just kind of quietly, shuffled him off to some home where he could write his.
So the right Geek, don't go down this rabbit hole unless. Don't go down this rabbit hole. What I actually like about the Quickville Sonichu fandom is like if I was ever going to talk to kids about internet safety, it's sort of like the Sonichu fandom is internet safety 101.
Okay.
Oh, it's great. I always want to do a whole. Actually, could we do a whole show on Sonichu? I know. Me and Matt were planning on doing one that summer.
Oh, I'd love to talk about Sonichu. Yeah,
I haven't been on Twitter, so I haven't been in contact with Matt for like a year. But if you ever want to do something on Sonichu, I'd be happy.
Okay.
That might actually
that would be outside of my wheelhouse, so that'd be something that Marm would host.
Well, you have to read it. You have to go and read through it and read the Quickville.
Gino Samuel has been doing a 50-part documentary on Sonichu and the Chris Chan saga And what's nice about it is like there were things I knew about, but I didn't know like what the order was. So like if you weren't following it, it's nice to have like basically a historian, Christorian laying out the entire history for you. There is it is a tragic story with like internet abuse and bullying and like a guy slowly descending into insanity, right? But I think the reason it's become such a massive fandom, I think, is just how strange and how long the story is. Like they've divided it down into different sagas. Like my personal favorite is Virgin with Rage saga, and that's just like years and years in the past at this point.
Oh yeah, he stopped being a virgin, or she rather. She stopped being a virgin of rage years back. She wound up hooking up with a prostitute, and that kind of ended the saga without much fanfare. But yeah, is
it Quickville as in Quick?
CWCville.
CWC. It's pronounced quick, and that's just one of the first weird things that you have to come to.
The problem is, if you try to read the Sonichu comic, it doesn't make sense unless you know what was going on in the writer's actual life, because he is acting out his fantasies, and his his real world enemies show up in his comic as villains. So that's what got the internet trolls interested, is these real world people would be getting mentioned in his comic. So they go looking for details, trying to figure out
like Jordan Peterson, Ta-Nehisi Coates comic.
Well, yeah, I think that Ta-Nehisi Coates and Christian Weston Chandler are at similar levels of artistic brilliance. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, there's actually, I don't know if it's still up. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find any TVC Mario on BitChute. There's some stuff, but it's all like, oh, TVC Mario's gay, kind of ripping on him. Videos, none of his original stuff, so I don't know. He's probably still around somewhere, but with Sonichu, there's something called the annotated Sonichu
that kind of like explains the lore as you read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Tumblr blog. Let me see. Is it still up? Yes, it's still up.
Okay.
You'd have to start from like Sonichu Zero.
With my Iron Man stuff, but
okay. Well, if you ever have a lull because it's a comic book, and I know you love comic books, and there are actually a lot of references. Like, it's very postmodern. He references all kinds of comics and video games, TV shows, sometimes obscure TV shows from like the 70s, like the old Ghostbusters, like before there was Ghostbusters. Like, not the real Ghostbusters, but the weird Ghostbusters. And if you look up this Tumblr blog called the Annotated Sonichu, the nice thing about it is they only go through the first 4 Sonichu 0 through Sonichu number 3, but it includes commentary and like kind of like art criticism, as well as explanations of some of the background lore. So it's a good way to get Sonichu and get a good introductory level understanding of what the hell's going on in the Sonichu as well. So that would be my recommendation. Is the
I'd alternatively recommend Tales Gets Trolled, which is like a similar thing where it's also like a really weird pop culture comic, like made by someone who is sort of a self-taught artist. I guess the big difference is for Sonichu, like it's all about the crazy, like the legitimate insanity of the author's, ideas about the world. Like his daydreams about how we'd like the world to be. And what's interesting about Tales Gets Trolled is it's also really crazy, but it's almost like the guy who makes Tales Gets Trolled is a little bit healthier, right? Like still weird, but like not as like miserably insane. Like you're almost kind of rooting for the guy, and like I have like this deep admiration for the creator of Tales Gets Trolled. That's not ironic at all. So.
Yeah. Well, I also, I mean, I unironically like Chris. I mean, I even went to BronyCon to meet him at one point. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, with the thing with Chris is that people have very, very conflicted views on him. Basically anybody who starts reading Sonnitude, like they go through phases where they'll be really confused, and then they'll be really horrified, and then they'll feel that it's very sweet, and then they'll hate his guts.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they'll feel really sorry for him, and you go through the whole range of emotions, and eventually it gets to the point, like everybody does this, where they start to question themselves and like what your role is in all this, and whether you are a good person. And it's this complete existential mindfuck.
I even, like, the first time I heard about it, I said, that's so mean. They're bullying him. But then you find out, like, he's doing it to himself a lot. And
then you're like, oh, okay, it makes sense. But then, like, you get to a part where, like the Blue Spike saga, where all of a sudden you snap back to, like, oh, God, no, this is horrible. And it's just a roller coaster of emotion and existential questions. And, like, that's what I love about it.
I read somewhere that Christian is the most documented person in history.
I would not be surprised. I mean, even just like Kiwi Farms itself has more information. Like there are stretches of time in which people have at least like a paragraph about what he did on any particular day.
The thing that blew my mind is someone showed his like letter to the editor to Nintendo Power, and I remembered reading that letter to the editor when that magazine first came out. It's like, oh my gosh, he's always been with me. Even before I knew what any of this was, he was always there.
That's because Chris is the CPU goddess who's controlling the dimension merge.
Wasn't he like the first Let's Player on YouTube?
I don't think so.
Like he at least was doing it back in like 2005 or 2006. He was doing it before there was a YouTube. He was making videos.
He uploaded videos and stuff. But most of the videos he uploaded were really weird things, like his Christian and the Hedgehog Boys, which is his band where he'd do covers of Britney Spears
popular songs.
Except that they changed the lyrics to like Backstreet Boys, and he changes it to "I Want a Girlfriend."
Right.
I'm a virgin with rage. You know, but you might actually. I think what you're thinking of may be the
Animal Crossing.
No, not Animal Crossing. Parappa the Rapper contest.
Yeah, the Parappa the Rapper contest.
Yeah, there was a really notorious segment where he was trying to go out with a girl, and he wanted to give her like a whatever console was current at that time, like a Game Boy Color or something. So he wanted to win the Parappa contest, so he made like a really horrible video, and somebody else won the Parappa contest.
The Stackhouse, yeah.
Yeah, Adam Stackhouse, and Chris flipped out on him and started this whole big campaign of threatening Adam Stackhouse because Adam Stackhouse, like, he wrote this nasty letter to the people judging it about how like he already had a girlfriend, and you know, he didn't need to win the Game Boy to give to his sweetheart.
He made a video with his sister. That's against the rules.
Yeah, it was a video with the sister, and he made like a response video where he was shooting Adam Stackhouse's picture with like a Nerf gun or something.
We're basically trying to peer pressure the right geek into becoming an awesome person like we are.
It's amazing. It's so much fun. Like, the comic book is great. And if you ever want to do that, like, we could definitely have that as a dystopia. I would be up for that. And it would probably give your channel a big boost too, because people are always looking for Chris Chan stuff. Like, it's good clickbait.
Okay.
But
I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm kind of in Marvel back issue land right now, but
yeah.
All right.
And it's really
so
touching too.
Yeah.
I mean, like the episode in, I think it was in Zero, where you know, like the girl kind of pretends to want to go on a date with him, and then it turns out that she's just doing it to laugh at him, and then Chris resolves to go back out there and try to find a girlfriend again, even though he was burned. You know, it's very, very touching and bizarre and crazy, and it's, I don't know, it's fun. It's definitely fun. It's like I mean.
Anyway, what are your
closing thoughts?
Yeah. So what are our final thoughts? Yeah, closing thoughts on Aldous Huxley and our Summa Tangentum.
Okay. Punchy makes a good argument for the New World Order
As always.
Programming perspective. I still kind of like the thing I can never get past is that as an artist, I like pretending to be a New World Order bad guy, right? And then I imagine the hero coming in to fight the New World Order bad guy, right? So it's sort of like I kind of sympathize with Aldous Huxley at the level of, well, yeah, if you're making up a story, you kind of do want to pretend to be the thing you're critiquing. So he wasn't able to like seal, you weren't able to make the kill shot argument for me. But it was kind of fascinating in that I was almost thinking that before you sort of took us down that downward spiral into that world. Yeah.
I think I've laid the seed.
Yeah.
It takes a while for people's entire worldview to be uprooted. But I think you'll be thinking about it tonight and you'll be like, oh, God, he was a bad guy. It was him all along. Yes. But I definitely do agree with you, Marmaduke. And
I will be doing...
Yeah, go ahead.
What I will be doing is reading The Island, because I'm going to read that and see like how I interpret what the text seems to be saying to me, and that might be that might either further solidify my grudging acknowledgement of some of the things you were saying.
Okay.
Actually, not all of the acknowledgement is grudging. I think that Well, here's my thought. I think that we can agree that all of what you're saying is true. That he does have some sympathy with the mechanics of this New World Order, or is he? But but we can say he has sympathy for that, and still say that Brave New World is in fact a dystopia, because it's kind of like Orwell is sympathetic with. Orwell is a commie, right? Yet he wrote 1984, right? So you can say, oh, he's got some sympathy for some aspects of XYZ, but this particular book is in fact a dystopia, even according to the author's point of view. Like,
well, again, I'm not so. I don't
know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think I get what you're trying to say. What you're really trying to say is you hate women. But no, yeah, I think I can understand what you're trying to say. I mean, I'd say it's kind of a question of degrees, though. Like, I think in 1984, there's very little about 1984. Maybe the fact that there's no more capitalists, but even in that sense, because Orwell makes a good point of showing capitalists as like cartoon villains. Like, it's clearly not the kind of thing that Orwell would want people to remember about capitalists. So I think in Orwell's case, like 1984, there's almost nothing in the book that he would agree with. And even the stuff he would agree with, he's very clearly trying to present it as if he doesn't agree with it, and being like, yeah, but I don't like this, but this is a dumb way of doing it, guys, right? Which, in the case of Brave New World, though, again, like I think Mom and you, right, Geek, were correct in talking about like the intention behind him. There are differences, which again with the island that kind of comes to the forefront. It's mostly about he's worried about the loss of art and the loss of this culture. This kind of sophisticated or maybe even just like sort of hippie, nice culture. But I think mechanically, as far as the actual mechanisms of the society, I think he's absolutely on board with it. I think he might quibble over the exact way to implement the things. Whether he wants nice little birds to beam propaganda at you, or whether he wants Alexas to kind of come up and give you their tin voice or something. I mean, he might quibble on that, but the actual mechanisms, and I think he's very much in favor of, and I think it's quite deliberate, because he was he wasn't just a normal author. He was one of these people who was positioned in the right place at the right time, in these groups who were very much concerned about getting world government and even tried to implement world government to varying degrees of success. So I definitely think that he's pro world order, or at least a lot more pro world order than any of us would be. And I think the degree to which you could see Brave New World as a dystopia, it kind of depends on what generation you're at. And yeah, so I would say that he's one of the lizards, definitely. He maybe thinks of himself as a good lizard. Maybe he's trying to get like a more egalitarian,
a more humane version of the lizard society, but the lizard society
velvet glove on the lizard society. But he's definitely, I would say he's definitely one of the lizards. No doubt about it in my mind.
And I would say that even if you were one of the lizards, I think that Brave New World is still a dystopian work in his view, because it's not the lizard society that he wants.
Well, it's nearly the lizard society he wants, but again, just read the island, see what you think.
Right, that's kind of the next step for us. Is we need a bit more perspective.
I'd just like to say that even if he's a lizard, like, I don't want to sound like I'm disrespecting him. Like I have mad respect for Huxley as an author. I think he was a great author. I also have a lot of respect for Bertrand Russell too, even though Bertrand Russell was also a lizard. So just to clear that up in case anyone.
It's absolutely a lizard, yeah.
I mean, he's a lizard, but he's a lizard that, I have nuanced feelings about lizards, I guess. I can see both sides.
We just have to wait for the dimensional rift, and then we'll all agree with Christian.
Right, so there are good lizards and there are bad lizards.
Well, I mean, there's bad lizards and there's slightly less bad lizards. there's artistically talented lizards who write really interesting books that I think everybody should read, but you should be cognizant of the fact that he is a lizard, and most of the things in the book he's actually trying to get you to agree with. So. Like Chinese media.
Right? I mean, I think it's true.
Like you watch like a Chinese movie, of a lot. You got to be cognizant of the Chinese propaganda coming through, like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of artistic people. If you look at the history of artistic elites and intellectuals, a lot of them were lizards of various degrees. Or that they had a lot of kooky ideas and lived lifestyles that were definitely not on the admirable end of the scale. So that's where we get the separate the art from the artist coming in. So anyway, so I think that will be the end of our live broadcast for this evening. Thank you. Thank you again, Punchy, Sonichu, and number one Marmaduke fan for
thank you to Right Geek for hosting.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. That's great. Thank you very much. All right, and this is Right Geek signing out.
Hopefully not for the last time.